In November of 2007, Kevin Dubrow was found dead in his Las Vegas home. He was 52 years old. The coroner would later determine he had been dead for 6 days before anyone noticed. For the frontman of Quiet Riot, the band that made history as the first heavy metal act to hit #1 on the Billboard charts, this was a tragic and lonely ending to a turbulent life. But Kevin's death was just the latest in a pattern that had haunted Quiet Riot for decades. Randy Rhoads, their legendary guitarist, died in a plane crash in 1982 while touring with Ozzy Osbourne. Frankie Banali, their powerhouse drummer, passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2020. Bass player Chuck Wright survived, but watched as nearly everyone he played alongside disappeared one by one. Some call it coincidence. Others whisper about a curse. But the real story of Quiet Riot is something far more human than supernatural. A tale of ambition, betrayal, addiction, and the brutal price of fame in the world of heavy metal. This is how a band that conquered the impossible ended up destroying itself from the inside out. If you're interested in the untold stories behind rock's greatest tragedies, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're diving deep into music history that most people never hear about. The story begins in 1973 in Los Angeles, where two teenagers with impossible dreams decided to form a band. Randy Rhoads was 17 years old, a guitar prodigy who had been playing since he was 6. His technique was already light years ahead of most professional musicians twice his age. Kelly Garney, his childhood friend and bass player, convinced Randy that they needed to start something serious, something that could actually make it in the cutthroat world of Los Angeles rock music. They called themselves Quiet Riot, a name that captured the contradiction they wanted to embody. Explosive energy contained, just beneath the surface, ready to detonate. But they had one major problem. They needed a singer, and not just any singer. They needed someone with the presence and power to match Randy's virtuoso guitar playing. That's when they found Kevin Dubrow. Kevin was performing with a band called Baby at the Starwood nightclub in West Hollywood when Randy first saw him. The moment Randy heard Kevin's voice, he knew they had found their frontman. Kevin had the range, the attitude, and most importantly, the relentless drive to succeed. He wasn't the most technically gifted singer in Los Angeles, but what he lacked in natural talent, he made up for with sheer determination and an ego that could fill an arena. From the very beginning, Kevin was polarizing. He was brash, outspoken, and had zero filter when it came to promoting the band or tearing down their competition. In interviews, he would openly trash other bands, claiming Quiet Riot was superior to anyone else on the Sunset Strip. This made him enemies almost immediately. Other musicians hated him. Club owners found him difficult to work with. Even some of his own bandmates struggled with his personality. But there was no denying that Kevin Dubrow was a star, whether people liked him or not. By 1975, Quiet Riot had become one of the most talked about bands in Los Angeles. They weren't signed to a major label yet, but they were packing clubs like the Starwood and the Whiskey A Go-Go on a regular basis. Their live shows were ferocious. Randy's guitar solos were unlike anything the Los Angeles scene had ever witnessed, blending classical music influences with hard rock intensity. Kevin commanded the stage like he was born to do it, strutting, screaming, and engaging the audience in ways that made every show feel like an event. But despite their local success, Quiet Riot couldn't catch a break with record labels. They were too heavy for mainstream rock radio, but not quite heavy enough for the emerging metal audience. Label executives didn't know what to do with them. And so, while other bands from the Los Angeles scene like Van Halen started getting signed to major deals, Quiet Riot remained stuck in the clubs, playing the same venues over and over again, waiting for their big break that never seemed to come. The break finally came, but not from America. In 1977, a Japanese record label called CBS Sony offered Quiet Riot a deal to record 2 albums exclusively for the Japanese market. It was an unusual arrangement. The albums wouldn't be released in the United States or Europe. They would only be available in Japan, where there was a growing appetite for American hard rock bands. For Randy and Kevin, it was better than nothing. At least they would finally have professionally recorded music out in the world. The first album, titled simply Quiet Riot, was released in Japan in 1978. The second, Quiet Riot 2, followed in 1979. Both albums showcased Randy Rhoads' extraordinary guitar work and Kevin Dubrow's raw vocal power. Songs like Slick Black Cadillac and Look in Any Window were heavy, aggressive, and years ahead of their time. If these albums had been released in America with proper promotion, Quiet Riot might have become legends right then and there, but they weren't released in America. And that meant that despite having 2 albums to their name, Quiet Riot was still unknown outside of the Los Angeles club circuit and a small but devoted fan base in Japan. The frustration was eating away at the band. They had the talent, they had the songs, they had the drive, but they couldn't get anyone in the American music industry to take them seriously. Randy Rhoads was especially restless. He knew he was capable of more than playing the same clubs in Los Angeles for the rest of his life. He wanted to tour the world. He wanted to be recognized as one of the greatest guitarists of his generation. And as much as he loved Quiet Riot, he could feel the walls closing in. The band wasn't going anywhere, and he knew it. Then, in 1979, everything changed. Ozzy Osbourne, the recently fired frontman of Black Sabbath, was in Los Angeles auditioning guitarists for his new solo band. Randy went to the audition mostly out of curiosity. He didn't expect to get the gig, but the moment Ozzy heard Randy play, he knew he had found someone special. Within days, Randy Rhoads was officially Ozzy Osbourne's lead guitarist. And just like that, Quiet Riot lost the one member they could never replace. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Quiet Riot's story, hit that like button and subscribe for more documentaries about the bands that shaped rock history. We're just getting started. Randy's departure destroyed Quiet Riot. Kevin Dubrow tried to keep the band alive, auditioning dozens of guitarists in an attempt to find someone who could even come close to Randy's level, but it was hopeless. No one could fill that void. By 1980, Quiet Riot had unofficially disbanded. Kevin was devastated, convinced that his dream of making it big was over before it ever really began. Meanwhile, Randy Rhoads was living the life that Quiet Riot had always wanted. He recorded 2 albums with Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz in 1980 and Diary of a Madman in 1981. Both albums were massive successes, and Randy was finally getting the recognition he deserved as one of the most innovative guitarists in rock music. Critics compared him to Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen. Guitar magazines put him on their covers. He was on the verge of becoming a legend. But on March 19, 1982, Randy Rhoads died in a plane crash during Ozzy's tour in Leesburg, Florida. He was 25 years old. The pilot of the small plane, Andrew Aycock, had been trying to buzz the tour bus as a prank, but he flew too low, clipped the bus with the plane's wing and crashed into a nearby mansion. Randy, the pilot, and the band's seamstress, Rachel Youngblood, were all killed instantly. The news shattered the rock music world. Randy had only been in the public eye for 3 years, but his impact was already immeasurable. Guitarists around the world mourned the loss of someone they saw as a once-in-a-generation talent. For Kevin Dubrow, Randy's death was personal in a way that few people could understand. This wasn't just the loss of a musical genius. This was the loss of a friend, a bandmate, and the person who had believed in Quiet Riot from the very beginning. Kevin fell into a deep depression. He bounced between short-lived bands and side projects, but nothing worked. The Los Angeles music scene had moved on. Hair metal was starting to explode. Bands like Mötley Crüe and Rat were getting signed to major deals and dominating MTV. Kevin watched it all happen and felt like he was being left behind. But then, in 1982, something shifted. A new lineup of Quiet Riot came together. Kevin was still the frontman. Frankie Banali, a powerhouse drummer who had played on the second Japanese album, rejoined the band. Carlos Cavazo, a skilled guitarist who understood that he could never replace Randy but could bring his own style to the table, signed on as the lead guitarist. And Rudy Sarzo, who had played bass with Randy and Ozzy's band, completed the lineup. For the first time in years, Kevin Dubrow had a real band again. And this time, they were determined to succeed. In 1983, Quiet Riot released Metal Health, their 3rd album overall, but their first to receive a proper release in the United States. The album's lead single, a cover of Slade's Come On Feel the Noise, became an instant hit. MTV put the music video into heavy rotation, and suddenly, Quiet Riot was everywhere. The song climbed the charts week after week, eventually peaking at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. But it was the album itself that made history. On November 26, 1983, Metal Health reached number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart, making Quiet Riot the first heavy metal band ever to achieve that milestone. They had beaten out Michael Jackson's Thriller, the biggest album in the world at the time. It was a moment that seemed impossible just a year earlier. Kevin Dubrow, the loudmouthed frontman that everyone had written off, was suddenly on top of the world. The success of Metal Health changed everything for Quiet Riot. They went from playing small clubs to headlining arenas. They toured relentlessly, performing in front of tens of thousands of fans every night. Kevin's face was plastered on magazine covers. MTV couldn't stop playing their videos. For a brief, shining moment, Quiet Riot was the biggest band in America, but the cracks were already starting to show. Kevin's ego, which had always been a problem, became completely unmanageable. He started doing interviews, where he would claim that Quiet Riot was better than every other band in the heavy metal scene, including veterans like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. He would openly mock other bands on the Sunset Strip, calling them sellouts and posers. His behavior alienated other musicians, music journalists, and even some of Quiet Riot's own fans. Internally, the band was falling apart. Kevin's need to control everything drove a wedge between him and the rest of the group. Rudy Sarzo, tired of the constant drama, left the band in 1985 to rejoin Ozzy Osbourne's band. Carlos Cavazo and Frankie Banali stayed, but their patience with Kevin was wearing thin. The follow-up albums, Condition Critical in 1984 and QR3 in 1986, failed to replicate the success of Metal Health. Critics savaged them, and sales dropped significantly. By 1987, Quiet Riot was done. The band officially broke up, and Kevin Dubrow was once again left wondering what had gone wrong. He had achieved the dream. He had reached #1. He had proven everyone wrong, but he couldn't hold on to it. And the blame, whether fair or not, fell squarely on his shoulders. Quiet Riot reunited multiple times over the next 2 decades, but none of the reunions ever recaptured the magic of 1983. They released new albums in 1988, 1995, 1999, 2001, 2006, and 2009. Some of these albums had their moments, but for the most part, they were ignored by the music industry and dismissed by critics. Quiet Riot had become a nostalgia act, playing county fairs and smaller venues for aging fans who wanted to relive their youth. Kevin Dubrow struggled with the fall from grace more than anyone else in the band. He had spent his entire life fighting to be taken seriously, and now he was seen as a relic of a bygone era. He battled addiction issues throughout the 1990s and 2000s. His relationships with the other members of Quiet Riot remained strained. Carlos Cavazo eventually left the band permanently, tired of Kevin's behavior and the lack of forward momentum, but Kevin kept going. He refused to give up on Quiet Riot, even when it seemed like the world had moved on. He kept booking tours, kept recording new music, and kept doing interviews where he defended the band's legacy with the same fire he had always had. In his mind, Quiet Riot was more than just a band. It was his identity, his purpose, his entire reason for existing. On November 25, 2007, Kevin Dubrow was found dead in his Las Vegas home. The coroner determined that he had died 6 days earlier, on November 19th, from an accidental cocaine overdose. He was 52 years old. The news devastated the rock community. Despite his abrasive personality and his many flaws, Kevin Dubrow had been a true believer in heavy metal. He had fought for Quiet Riot until the very end, never giving up on the dream even when everyone else had. Frankie Banali, the last remaining member of the classic Metal Health lineup, kept Quiet Riot alive after Kevin's death. He recruited new vocalists and guitarists, touring under the Quiet Riot name and honoring the legacy that he and Kevin had built together. But in August of 2020, Frankie Banali died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 68. With his death, the last living connection to Quiet Riot's glory days was gone. So what is the truth about Quiet Riot? Were they cursed? Or were they just another band that couldn't survive the pressures of fame, addiction, and ego? The deaths of Randy Rhoads, Kevin Dubrow, and Frankie Banali spanned nearly 4 decades. Randy's death was a tragic accident. Kevin's was the result of years of substance abuse. Frankie's was cancer, something no one could have prevented. There's no supernatural explanation. There's no curse. There's just the brutal reality of a band that lived fast, burned bright, and paid the ultimate price. But Quiet Riot's legacy is more than just tragedy. They were the first heavy metal band to hit #1 on the Billboard charts, a feat that opened doors for countless other bands in the genre. Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and every other metal act that followed owes something to Quiet Riot for proving that heavy metal could be commercially successful. And Randy Rhoads' influence on guitar playing is still felt today, more than 40 years after his death. Kevin Dubrow, for all his flaws, never stopped believing in the band. He fought for Quiet Riot until the day he died, refusing to let the dream go even when it seemed hopeless. That kind of dedication, that kind of passion is rare, and while it ultimately contributed to his downfall, it's also what made Quiet Riot special in the first place. If this story moved you or made you think differently about Quiet Riot's place in rock history, please like this video, Share it with other rock fans, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the bands that change music forever. Quiet Riot's story is a reminder that fame doesn't protect you from tragedy, and that sometimes the cost of chasing a dream is higher than anyone should have to pay. But their music, their legacy, and their impact on heavy metal will live on long after the headlines have faded.